The silence of deep space shattered as alarms screamed across the bridge of the Galactic Council Station Harmony. Ambassador Velkari's 6 eyes widened as data streams flooded the main display. Her delicate antennae trembled with each new report that arrived. Confirmed hostile contact in sectors 7 through 12, the Zalathi communications officer reported, his voice crackling with fear. The Devourers have returned. Velkari felt her heart sink. The Devourers were a nightmare from ancient history, a swarm species that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty void in their wake. They had vanished thousands of years ago, and most species had hoped they were gone forever. "How many ships?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Initial scans show over 10,000 vessels, Ambassador. More emerging from subspace every minute." The conference room doors hissed open as representatives from dozens of species rushed in. The Altarian delegates' feathers stood on end. The Korvax ambassador's usually calm blue skin had turned pale gray, and even the mighty Thraxians looked shaken. "We must evacuate immediately," the Zalathi Prime Minister declared. "Our combined fleets number less than 3,000 ships. We cannot stand against such numbers." "Evacuation is impossible," the tactical advisor interrupted. "The Devourers have already cut off all major hyperlane routes. They're moving faster than our models predicted." Velkari studied the holographic display showing the enemy advance. The Devourers moved like a plague across the star map, their biomechanical ships consuming asteroids, moons, anything with raw materials to fuel their endless hunger. Already 3 frontier colonies had gone dark. "What about the defense platforms?" someone asked. "Overwhelmed in minutes. The Devourers adapt to our weapons faster than we can recalibrate." Despair settled over the room like a shroud. The Galactic Council represented the pinnacle of civilized species, yet all their technology, all their advancement meant nothing against this ancient threat. "There is one option," Velkari said quietly. The room turned to her. She could feel their desperate hope and their immediate fear when they realized what she meant. "No," the Altarian delegate said immediately. "We cannot involve them. They're too dangerous, too unpredictable." "The humans are Deathworlders," the Korvax ambassador added. "Their very presence violates half our safety protocols. Their planet's gravity alone would crush most of us." Velkari understood their fear. Humanity had only been discovered 50 years ago, and the first contact reports had been terrifying. A species that evolved on a world where the rain could be acid, where massive predators hunted in packs, where the weather itself could kill in 100 different ways. Humans breathed a mixture of gases that was toxic to 60% of known species. They consumed liquids that would dissolve Zalathi stomach lining. Their military tactics were considered so extreme that viewing human historical war documentation required psychological preparation. "The humans have stayed within their borders," the Thraxian general rumbled. "They trade peacefully." "Perhaps the stories are exaggerated." "Exaggerated?" The Altarian's voice rose to a shriek. "I've seen the footage from their world. They jump from flying vehicles for entertainment. They poison themselves with fermented drinks for pleasure. Their children play games that would be lethal combat training on any civilized world." Another alarm sounded. The Devourers had taken 3 more systems. "We're running out of time," Velkari said. "Yes, the humans are dangerous. Yes, they're unpredictable. But they're also the only species the Devourers have never encountered. The only ones who might think differently enough to find a solution." "And if they turn on us afterward?" the Korvax asked. "Then we die later instead of now," Velkari replied bluntly. "At least with the humans, we have a chance." The vote was close, but desperation won. With trembling tentacles, Velkari initiated the quantum communicator, sending a message to the quarantine zone around Sol system. The response came faster than expected. The human face that appeared on screen was weathered and scarred, with Predator's eyes that seemed to look through Valkyrie rather than at her. Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force. "Ambassador Valkyrie," the human said. "We've been monitoring the situation. The Devourers, correct?" "Yes, Admiral. The Galactic Council formally requests Earth's assistance. We understand this is unprecedented, but—" "How long do we have?" Chen interrupted. Valkyrie blinked all 6 eyes in surprise. "At current rate of advance, perhaps 30 standard days before they reach the core worlds. Send us everything. Technical specifications, biological data, tactical analyses, everything you have on these Devourers. Admiral, I must warn you, the Devourers number in the millions. They adapt to weapons, consume entire worlds, and have never been stopped. Every species that has faced them has been—" "Ambassador." Chen's scarred face split into what humans called a smile. It displayed far too many teeth. "You're talking to a species that evolved on a planet that tries to kill us daily. We've been preparing for something like this our whole existence." The connection ended. Around the conference table, dozens of species sat in stunned silence. "What have we done?" the Altarian whispered. Within hours, human fleets began emerging from the Sol system. The watching council members gasped. They had expected perhaps a few hundred ships. Maybe 1,000 if the humans had been building in secret. Instead, over 5,000 vessels of impossible design poured into space. Ships that looked wrong to civilized eyes, built with sharp angles and aggressive lines, bristling with weapons that violated several treaties humanity had never signed. But it wasn't the ships that truly terrified the observers. It was the broadcasts. Human communication channels exploded with activity, not encrypted military codes, but open transmissions. Music that pounded with primitive rhythms. Voices raised in languages the translators struggled with, and imagery that made hardened diplomats look away. "Are they celebrating?" the Korvax asked in disbelief. On the screens, human soldiers performed pre-battle rituals. Some painted their faces with designs that triggered primal fear responses in every watching species. Others sharpened blades, actual metal blades, while singing songs about death and glory. The humans moved with a coordinated chaos that defied military doctrine, yet somehow worked. Admiral Chen's voice cut across all channels. "Attention all human forces. The call has been answered. For too long we've held back, played nice, pretended to be something we're not. But now they need us to be what we truly are." A pause. Death Worlders. The human fleets began to move, not in the careful formations the Council used, but in fluid pack movements that reminded Valkyrie uncomfortably of the Predator documentaries from Earth. Wolves, she remembered. They moved like wolves. "Admiral Chen is hailing us," the communications officer reported. Chen appeared on screen again, now wearing armor that looked like it was designed to intimidate as much as protect. "Ambassador, pull your fleets back to the core worlds. Form a defensive line, but do not engage." Admiral, surely coordinated tactics would be, "With respect, Ambassador, your people fight wars. Humans wage them. There's a difference you're about to see." "I don't understand." Chen's grin widened. "Your species evolved despite your environments. Humans evolved because of ours. Every advancement we've made came from conflict. With nature, with predators, with ourselves. We don't just survive existential threats, Ambassador. We thrive on them." The connection ended again. On the tactical display, human fleets raced toward the advancing devourer swarm at speeds that should have been suicidal. "They'll be slaughtered," the Thraxian general muttered. Valkyrie wasn't so sure. She had studied humans more than most, read their history with a mixture of horror and fascination. These were a people who had split the atom before achieving sustainable spaceflight, who had weaponized diseases before discovering their cures, who had looked at their hostile world and, instead of seeking harmony, had conquered it. The first contact between human forces and the Devourers was about to begin. The Council held its collective breath, watching tactical displays from safe distances. Energy spikes detected from human vessels, a technician reported. They're by the void. What are those readings? The human ships had begun deploying weapons that the Council's computers couldn't classify, not because they were advanced, but because they were wrong. Weapons that turned space itself into a hazard. Devices that violated the laws of physics in ways that made scientists weep. Incoming transmission from the lead Devourer hive, the communications officer announced. This was unprecedented. The Devourers had never communicated before. The signal resolved into patterns that the universal translator struggled with. When it finally managed to parse the meaning, the message was simple. What are you? From the human fleet, Admiral Chen's response broadcast on all frequencies. We're humans. We're the species that looked at our death world and made it our home. We're the ones who turned killing into an art form and survival into a science. We're what happens when evolution decides to create something that refuses to die. A pause. We're your worst nightmare, given form and purpose. The battle was about to begin. Around the council chambers, representatives of 100 civilized species watched in terrified awe as humanity prepared to show the galaxy why Earth was classified as a death world, and why its children were so much worse. The Devourers had consumed countless civilizations, faced technologies beyond imagination, adapted to every weapon and strategy they encountered. They had been the ultimate predator for millennia. They had never faced humans. As the two forces closed to engagement range, Velkari found herself thinking of an old Earth phrase she had read once. Beware the fury of a patient man. Humanity had been patient for 50 years, playing by the Council's rules, restraining their nature. That patience had just ended. Space itself seemed to hold its breath as Deathworlders and Devourers raced toward collision. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity answered the call to war. And may the void have mercy on them all. The first human ship to engage the Devourers was the TDS Persistence, a destroyer that by Council standards should have kept its distance and fired from maximum range. Instead, it accelerated directly into the swarm. "Are they insane?" the Altarian delegate shrieked. "That's suicide!" On the tactical display, the Persistence vanished into a cloud of Devourer bioships. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to scream. The human vessel detonated something inside the swarm, not a conventional weapon, but something that made the watching scientists recoil. The explosion didn't just destroy Devourer ships, it corrupted them. Biomechanical vessels twisted and writhed as their own organic components turned against them. "Chemical weapons," the Korvax ambassador whispered. "They're using chemical weapons." "Biological," Velkari corrected, reading the sensor data with growing horror and fascination. "They've somehow created a virus that attacks the Devourer's bioneural networks." The Persistence emerged from the dying swarm, its hull scarred but intact. More human ships followed its example, diving into Devourer formations with weapons that defied conventional warfare. Admiral Chen's face appeared on a priority channel. "Ambassador, I need you to relay something to your scientists. The Devourers adapt to energy weapons and conventional attacks because they follow patterns. So we're not using patterns." "What are you using?" Velkari asked, though she dreaded the answer. Chaos. The human battle plan, if it could be called that, unfolded across the sector. Where Council fleets would have formed defensive lines and coordinated fire patterns, humans attacked in seemingly random groups. Ships would strike, retreat, circle back, strike again. No two attacks were the same. One human cruiser, the TDS Relentless, broadcast classical music while firing projectiles filled with what the computers identified as a modified strain of Earth bacteria. The bacteria consumed the organic components of devourer ships, spreading from vessel to vessel faster than they could adapt. Another group of human ships used weapons that simply shouldn't exist. Gravity hammers that compressed space. Temporal mines that aged sections of enemy ships thousands of years in seconds. Something called a cascade resonator that made devourer vessels shake themselves apart at a molecular level. How? The Thraxian general demanded. How do they have such weapons? They've been preparing, Velkari realized. For 50 years, they've been watching us, learning our limits, our rules, and they've been building weapons we would never conceive of because we would never need them. The Devourers tried to adapt. They always adapted, but human tactics shifted faster than evolution could follow. When the swarm developed immunity to one biological weapon, humans deployed a different one. When they adapted to projectile weapons, humans switched to energy beams. When they shielded against energy, humans used weapons that bypassed shields entirely, and through it all, the humans sang. Their communication channels remained open, flooding space with battle hymns, war cries, and something they called heavy metal. The psychological warfare was as effective as their physical weapons. Several council species had to mute the audio feeds to prevent their crews from panicking. 3 hours into the battle, the impossible happened. The Devourers began to retreat. "They're pulling back," a sensor tech reported, disbelief clear in their voice. "The Devourers are actually retreating." But the humans didn't let them go. "No warnings. No survivors," Admiral Chen commanded across the fleet. "They came to consume. We came to exterminate." Human ships pursued the fleeing Devourers with predatory efficiency. Where council doctrine would have dictated allowing an enemy to retreat, humans pressed their advantage. Ships that had pretended to be damaged suddenly came alive, cutting off escape routes. Fighters that had seemed randomly scattered formed into hunting packs, herding Devourer vessels into kill zones. The TDS vengeance demonstrated why humans had earned their Death World classification. When its conventional weapons ran low, the crew did something no civilized species would consider. They rammed their ship directly into a Devourer command node, detonating their reactor core on impact. "They killed themselves to destroy the enemy," the Korvax said in shock. "No," Velkari corrected, watching the sensor data. "Look, escape pods launched just before impact. They timed it perfectly." Human escape pods were recovered by other vessels, their occupants returning to battle within hours. The message was clear. Humans would sacrifice their ships, their resources, even their lives if it meant victory. But it was the arrival of Earth's special forces that truly showed the galaxy what Deathworlders could do. Ships designated as marine dropships began boarding Devourer vessels. The Council had always considered boarding actions impossible against the Devourers. Their ships were filled with toxic atmospheres, crawling with defensive organisms, and had no compatible life support. Humans didn't care. Marine squads in powered armor that looked more like personal tanks stormed through Devourer ships. They carried weapons that would be considered war crimes on any Council world. Flamethrowers that burned even in the vacuum of space. Sonic disruptors that liquefied organic matter. Something called a molecular blade that cut through anything it touched. The helmet camera feeds were quickly classified. What the human Marines did inside those ships was too disturbing for most species to witness. They didn't just kill, they terrorized. Moving through corridors filled with toxic gas and defensive organisms, hunting the Devourers in their own environment. "They're enjoying this," someone whispered in horror. It was true. The human communication channels were filled with laughter, challenges between squads for who could clear ships faster, soldiers comparing kill counts like it was a game. One Marine sergeant, asked by a reporter how they could board ships with atmospheres toxic enough to melt most environmental suits, had laughed. Toxic? Sure, but you should try surviving in Australia. Now that's toxic. The turning point came when the humans deployed their ultimate weapon. Not a bomb or a virus, but something far worse. Human creativity unleashed without restrictions. A group of human scientists, watching the battle from a research vessel, noticed patterns in how the devourers communicated. Within hours, they had cracked the bio-neural frequency the swarm used to coordinate. "What are they doing?" Valkyrie asked, as human ships began broadcasting on that frequency. The answer became horrifyingly clear. Humans were sending corrupted data directly into the devourer hive mind. Not just computer viruses, but concepts and ideas that the collective consciousness couldn't process. Images of things that shouldn't exist. Mathematical paradoxes. Philosophical questions with no answers. They were driving the hive mind insane. Devourer ships began attacking each other, their coordination shattered. Some flew in circles, others simply shut down, their bio-neural networks overloaded with contradictory information. "They're using mimetic weapons," a council scientist said in awe. "Weaponized ideas. How do you even defend against that?" You didn't. That was the point. As the battle raged, Valkyrie began to understand something fundamental. The council species had always focused on defense, on survival, on maintaining civilization. They built weapons to protect. Humans built weapons to destroy. A devourer superhive, larger than some moons, emerged from subspace. It was a last desperate attempt to overwhelm human forces with sheer size and power. The bioship could consume entire fleets, had armor thick enough to shrug off most weapons, and carried millions of warrior drones. Admiral Chen's response was broadcast across all channels. Finally, a real challenge: all ships implement Protocol Omega. Human vessels began moving in a pattern that made no tactical sense. Ships scattered across the system, suddenly accelerated toward seemingly empty points in space. The Council watched in confusion as humans appeared to abandon favorable positions. Then space itself cracked. The human ships hadn't been moving randomly. They had been placing gravitational charges at precise coordinates. When detonated simultaneously, they created an artificial black hole directly in the superhive's path. "That's impossible," the Thraxian general said flatly. "The energy requirements alone." "They've been draining stars," Valkyrie interrupted, reading the sensor data. "Small stars, but still, they've been storing stellar energy for this exact purpose." The superhive tried to escape, but human ships herded it toward the growing gravitational anomaly. Smaller vessels sacrificed themselves to damage the hive's engines, ensuring it couldn't flee. As the massive bioship was pulled toward the black hole, Admiral Chen opened a channel to it. "You asked what we are. We're the species that looked at the fundamental forces of the universe and thought, how can we weaponize this? We're the ones who split atoms for power and then realized we could split them for war." The superhive's final transmission was a single concept that the translators struggled with. The closest approximation was, why? Chen's answer was humanity distilled to its essence, because we can. The artificial black hole consumed the superhive in minutes. Around it, the remaining devourer forces scattered, their coordination completely broken. Human ships pursued relentlessly, turning retreat into rout. In 12 hours, humanity had done what the combined council fleets couldn't do in millennia. They had broken the devourers. But they weren't done. "Admiral Chen!" Valkyrie called out as reports flooded in of human ships pursuing fleeing devourers across multiple systems. "The enemy is retreating. Surely now we can discuss terms." "Terms?" Chen's scarred face showed genuine confusion. "Ambassador, they came to commit genocide. There are no terms. There is only ending the threat." "But they're beaten." "Beaten isn't eliminated. They'll regroup, rebuild, come back in 1,000 years when we've grown complacent?" "No." His expression hardened. We're going to find every hive, every seed ship, every last trace of their species, and we're going to burn it all." The council chambers erupted in protests. This went against every civilized principle of warfare. You didn't pursue a beaten enemy to extinction. You showed mercy. Mercy? Chen's laugh was cold. Ambassador, on Earth, showing mercy to a predator just means it comes back to eat your children. We learned that lesson before we could walk upright. Human fleets spread across the galaxy like antibodies responding to infection. They developed new tracking methods to find hidden devourer bases. They recruited formerly consumed species who wanted revenge. They turned the hunt for the devourers into a crusade. And they shared their weapons. "You're giving us the virus codes?" the Korvax ambassador asked in shock as human data packets arrived at council stations. "And the gravity hammer specifications," Chen confirmed. "And the chemical weapon formulas, everything we used." "Why?" "Because," Chen said simply, "the next threat might come when we're not around. You need to be ready. You need to be willing to do what must be done." As human ships continued their relentless pursuit of the fleeing devourers, Velkari found herself studying the battle data again and again. Everything about human tactics violated conventional military wisdom, yet it had worked perfectly. They had turned warfare into chaos and chaos into victory. The Altarian delegate approached her, feathers still ruffled with distress. "What have we unleashed, Ambassador?" Velkari watched the tactical display showing human ships spreading across the galaxy, hunting devourers with predatory efficiency. "We didn't unleash anything. We simply gave them permission to stop pretending they were something they're not." "And what are they?" She thought of Earth, that impossible death world where life had evolved not despite the danger but because of it, where every creature was locked in eternal competition for survival, where cooperation existed only because it made the participating groups better killers. "They're survivors," she said finally, "the ultimate survivors. And they'll make sure we survive too, whether we like their methods or not." The second phase of what humans were already calling the Devourer War was beginning. Council species watched in mixed awe and horror as humanity showed the galaxy what total war looked like. No warnings, no survivors, no mercy, just Deathworlders doing what Deathworlders did best, making sure their enemies became extinct before they could return the favor. 6 months after the first engagement, the galaxy had changed forever. Human fleets moved through space like apex predators, methodically hunting down every last trace of the devourers. What the Council had expected to be a war had become an extermination. Velkari stood on the observation deck of the human dreadnought TDS extinction event, a name that would have seemed overdramatic before she'd seen it in action. Admiral Chen stood beside her, pointing to a holographic display showing the latest tactical data. "There," he said, highlighting a sector near the galactic rim. "Deep space scans found gravitational anomalies consistent with devourer hibernation pods, probably been dormant for thousands of years." "And you're going to destroy them," Velkari said. It wasn't a question anymore. "Every last one. Can't risk them waking up in another millennium when everyone's forgotten how to fight them." The extinction event and its battle group jumped to the target sector. Velkari watched human efficiency in action. They didn't just destroy the hibernation pods, they analyzed them first, extracting data about devourer biology, technology, and history. Knowledge that could be used to ensure nothing like them ever rose again. "Your species terrifies me," Velkari admitted, as another cluster of ancient pods was vaporized. Chen nodded. "Good. Terror keeps you alive. Complacency gets you eaten." The human approach to warfare had proven devastatingly effective. While Council species had always fought defensively, trying to preserve their civilizations, humans fought offensively, focusing solely on destroying the enemy. They had turned the entire galaxy into a hunting ground. But it was what happened next that truly showed the Council what humanity was capable of. A distress signal reached the extinction event from a remote system. Not a devourer signal, but from a species calling themselves the Vec. They had been in hibernation for millennia, fleeing from the devourers, and had just awakened to find human ships in their system. "Please," the Vec representative pleaded over communications. "We mean no harm. We're just refugees. We hid when the devourers came for our worlds." The bridge crew looked to Admiral Chen. By Council standards, these were innocents deserving of protection. The Vec had done nothing wrong except survive. "Scan their ships," Chen ordered. The results came back quickly. Vec vessels had biological components similar to devourer technology. Further analysis showed genetic markers indicating the Vec had been experimenting with devourer biotechnology before going into hibernation. "They were trying to become like the devourers," the science officer reported. "Probably thought it was the only way to survive." Chen's expression didn't change. "Target all Vec vessels. Fire when ready." "Admiral," Velkari protested, "they're not devourers. They're victims." "They're infected," Chen replied coldly. "Compromised. In 1,000 years, maybe less, they'll complete their transformation and we'll have Devourers 2.0. Better to end it now." The Vec fleet was destroyed in minutes. Velkari watched in horror as escape pods were targeted and eliminated. No warnings, no survivors. "This is genocide," she whispered. "No," Chen corrected. "This is prevention. Every species that's tried to use devourer technology has eventually become like them. We're not going to let that cycle continue." Word of the Vec extinction spread through Council space. Some species were horrified. Others, particularly those who had lost worlds to the devourers, understood. The galaxy was learning that human mercy had very specific limits. The hunt continued. Human ships developed new technologies specifically for tracking devourers. They recruited bounty hunters from species that had suffered under devourer attacks. They established monitoring stations in deep space to detect any sign of devourer resurgence. 3 months later, human forces located what they had been searching for: the devourer origin world. Hidden in a pocket of folded space, the planet was a nightmare of biotechnology. Entire continents were covered in organic factories that could produce millions of devourer ships. Hibernation facilities held trillions of dormant drones. Data cores contained the accumulated knowledge of countless consumed civilizations. "It's beautiful in a horrific way," one of the human scientists commented. "The perfect merger of biology and technology." "Glass it," Chen ordered. "Sir, the scientific value—" "I said glass it. Every bit of devourer technology is a potential infection vector. We're not risking contamination." What followed was destruction on a scale that made even hardened human soldiers pause. Planet cracker bombs that destabilized tectonic plates. Atmospheric incendiaries that turned the sky into flame. Biological weapons that consumed organic matter at a molecular level. It took 3 days to completely sterilize the devourer homeworld. When it was done, nothing remained but a ball of molten rock and ash. Human ships then destabilized the pocket dimension itself, ensuring no one could ever find even the ruins. "Overkill," Velkari muttered. "There's no such thing as overkill when it comes to existential threats," Chen replied. "There's only dead and not dead enough." As the campaign neared its end, the political situation in Council space grew complicated. Many species were grateful to humanity for ending the devourer threat. Others feared what humans might do next. A species capable of such thorough destruction, with weapons that violated every concept of civilized warfare, was not something to take lightly. The Altarian delegation formally proposed new restrictions on human military development. The Korvax suggested establishing monitoring stations around Sol's system. The Thraxians wanted humans to share all their weapon technologies to maintain balance. Admiral Chen's response to these proposals was broadcast to the entire council. For 50 years, we played by your rules. We limited ourselves, held back, pretended to be something we weren't. Then the Devourers came, and you begged us to be what we truly are. We answered that call. We bled for you, died for you, committed acts that go against your precious civilized values to keep you safe. He paused, letting the words sink in. And now you want to chain us again? Put us back in our box? Make us pretend that we're not the apex predators of a death world? No. The transmission showed Earth's true military might for the first time. Hidden shipyards in asteroid belts. Weapon research facilities on moons. A fleet 3 times larger than what they had revealed. We'll honor our borders. We'll trade peacefully. We'll even share some technologies to help you defend yourselves. But we will never again pretend to be weak. We will never again hide what we are. The ultimatum was clear. Accept humanity as they were, or face the consequences. Velkari found herself in the unique position of mediating between humanity and the Council. She had spent more time with humans than any other diplomat, had seen them at their best and worst. They could conquer the galaxy if they wanted, the Altarian delegate said during one heated session. What's stopping them? The same thing that stopped them for 50 years, Velkari replied. They don't want to conquer. They want to survive and ensure others survive too. But they'll do it their way. Their way is monstrous. Their way works, Velkari countered. The Devourers are gone. Not beaten back, not contained, but gone. Forever. How many civilizations did we lose over the millennia because we were too civilized to do what was necessary? The final Devourer stronghold was discovered in a nebula at the galaxy's edge. It was less a military base and more a repository containing genetic samples and data from every species the Devourers had consumed. Trillions of lives reduced to information storage. Human xenobiologists wanted to study it, to possibly restore some of the extinct species. Admiral Chen overruled them. It's a trap, he explained to Velkari. Maybe not an intentional one, but a trap nonetheless. Someone will look at that data and think they can use it better than the Devourers did. They'll try to resurrect something, improve it, control it, and the cycle will start again. But the knowledge of entire civilizations is how the Devourers stayed ahead of everyone for so long. They didn't just consume bodies, they consumed ideas, technologies, cultures. That knowledge base is what made them unstoppable. Chen's expression was grim. It all burns. The destruction of the repository was witnessed by representatives from every council species. Human ships surrounded the structure and deployed weapons that didn't just destroy but erased. Antimatter charges that annihilated matter at the subatomic level. Reality warpers that removed sections from existence itself. When it was done, not even atoms remained. With the last Devourer facility destroyed, Admiral Chen made a final broadcast. The Devourers are extinct. Every ship, every world, every hidden base, every genetic sample, they're gone. But let their fate serve as a warning. Humanity answered your call. We became the monsters you needed us to be, and we're very, very good at it. But we're not your monsters. We're not your weapons. We're your neighbors. Dangerous neighbors who will leave you alone as long as you leave us alone. But if another threat comes, if something else crawls out of the dark between the stars, remember what we did here. Remember that we're the species that looked at extinction and said, not today. We're the ones who turned a death world into a home and death itself into a tool. We're humanity. And we're still here. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, species reacted in different ways. Some celebrated, some worried, all remembered. Velkari stood in the council chambers one last time before returning to her homeworld. The debates were still raging about how to handle humanity going forward. Some wanted alliance, some wanted containment, some wanted to pretend Earth didn't exist. "What do you think we should do?" the new council president asked her. Velkari thought of everything she had seen. The brutality, the efficiency, the complete lack of mercy toward threats, but also the protection, the sacrifice, the willingness to become monsters so others didn't have to. "We should be grateful," she said finally. "Grateful that when we needed Deathworlders, they answered. Grateful that they're willing to go back to being neighbors instead of conquerors. And we should pray to whatever powers we believe in that we never give them a reason to show us what they're truly capable of." She paused at the chamber doors, looking back one last time. Because what they did to the Devourers, that was them being restrained. That was them fighting someone else's war with someone else's lives at stake. Imagine what they'd do if we threatened Earth directly. The council members shuddered at the thought. As Velkari's ship departed for home, she passed human vessels returning to Sol System. They had removed the weapons that violated council law, packed away the technologies that terrified civilized species. They were going back to pretending, at least on the surface. But everyone knew now. The mask had slipped. The galaxy had seen what lurked beneath humanity's civilized veneer. They had seen Deathworlders in their natural state, organized, focused, and utterly ruthless when threatened. The Devourers had been ancient, powerful, and seemingly unstoppable. They had consumed civilizations for millennia, adapted to every weapon, survived every attempt to stop them. They had lasted exactly 9 months against humanity. On Earth, in a small bar in what used to be called Montana, a group of veterans from the Devourer War raised their glasses in a toast. They had done terrible things, committed acts that would haunt their dreams, become the monsters that the galaxy needed. "To the Devourers," one soldier said, "they asked for a war." "And we gave them extinction," the others chorused. They drank in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Tomorrow they would return to being farmers, teachers, engineers. They would pretend to be civilized, peaceful, harmless, but they would remember. They would stay ready. Because the galaxy was vast and full of threats, and somewhere out there, something else might make the mistake of threatening humanity or its allies. And when that day came, the Deathworlders would answer the call again. No warnings, no survivors, no mercy, just humans being human. In the depths of space, automated human monitoring stations kept their endless vigil. They searched for any sign of Devourer resurgence, any hint of returning threat. They found nothing but the void. The Devourers were gone, not defeated, not driven back, not contained, extinct. And across the galaxy, every species that had witnessed the war remembered a simple truth. When you call upon monsters to save you, make sure you can live with what they do. Humanity had answered the call. They had saved the galaxy. Everyone just had to hope they never had to call again, because next time the Deathworlders might not stop. The countdown timer on the main display showed 30 minutes remaining. Half of the hour humanity had given them was already gone, and Commander Zaxthor was no closer to understanding the impossible situation they faced. His senior staff had gathered in the tactical planning chamber, each bringing disturbing pieces of a puzzle that refused to make sense. "The gravitational anomalies are unlike anything in our database," Science Officer Trelkan reported, her crystalline form pulsing with agitation. "They're not consistent with any known FTL technology. It's as if space itself is being folded, compressed. The energy requirements would be astronomical." "The Vega Depot destruction is confirmed," added strategic analyst Morgeth. "But here's what makes no sense. The debris pattern indicates the station was destroyed from the inside out. Not by external bombardment, but by simultaneous detonations throughout its structure. To accomplish that, they would need to have physically been there." Zaxthor's tactical display showed Earth floating serenely below, giving no indication of the impossibilities it represented. Could they have developed some form of cloaking technology we can't detect? Negative, Commander, Vexara responded. Our sensors can detect even the most advanced stealth systems. Nothing could have approached Vega without triggering multiple alarms, unless... She paused, her tentacles writhing with uncertainty. Unless they were already there, had been there for who knows how long. That's impossible. The depot was constructed only 20 cycles ago. Earth showed no signs of space capability beyond their own system until... Kreltok stopped mid-sentence, his mobility sphere spinning rapidly as he processed new data. Commander, I've been analyzing Earth's historical records more carefully. Their space program, it doesn't match. Explain. According to public records, humanity achieved spaceflight less than a century ago. But when I examine the data more carefully, there are gaps, inconsistencies, missions that launched but have no landing records, satellites that disappeared from tracking, personnel who vanished from registries. Kreltok projected his findings onto the main screen. What if their public space program was just a cover? A deception to hide their true capabilities? The tactical officer's console suddenly erupted in alarms. Commander, new contacts appearing throughout the system. They're not using any transit method we can identify. They're just appearing. On the display, dozens of new signatures materialized around the Krellian fleet. Not the massive warships they might have expected, but small craft, each no larger than a frigate. They appeared to be of human construction, but incorporated design elements that hurt to look at directly, as if the ships existed in more dimensions than the eye could process. Incoming transmission, Hexall announced. It's Dr. Webb again. The human's face appeared on screen, still calm but with an underlying intensity that hadn't been there before. Commander Zaxthor, I trust you've been analyzing our warning shot at Vega. Impressive, wasn't it? 20 years we've had people there, waiting, watching, learning. People? Zaxthor couldn't hide his shock. You're claiming you had humans at our depot for 20 years? Oh, not at your depot, Webb corrected. In it. Integrated into your crews, walking your corridors, eating in your mess halls. You see, Commander, humanity learned long ago that the best way to defeat an enemy is to understand them completely. And we've had plenty of time to understand you. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. If humans had been infiltrating Krellian facilities, learning their technology, their procedures, their weaknesses... Impossible. Security Chief Gartok snarled. Our biometric sensors would detect any infiltration. Humans look nothing like Krellians. The physical differences alone... Webb's smile turned sad. Commander, has your analysis of our entertainment media revealed our fascination with shapeshifters, changelings, beings that can take any form? He paused. Fiction has always been humanity's way of preparing for possibility, and we've had decades to turn possibility into reality. On cue, one of the bridge officers, a junior sensor technician who had served faithfully for 5 years, suddenly wavered like a heat mirage. The familiar Krellian form dissolved, revealing a human in some kind of advanced suit that seemed to bend light around it. The bridge erupted in chaos. Security officers raised their weapons, but the revealed human raised empty hands. Please don't, she said in perfect Krellian. I'm Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Earth Intelligence Service. I'm here to deliver a message, not to fight. Zaxthor found himself frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. One of his own crew, someone who had served on his ship for years, was human. How many others were there? How deep did this infiltration go? The message is simple, Chen continued, her form still wavering between human and Krellian as her camouflage system fluctuated. Earth has been preparing for this day since we first detected radio signals from the stars and realized we weren't alone. Every advancement, every breakthrough has been directed toward one goal: ensuring humanity's survival when the universe came calling. "Killer!" someone shouted, but Zaxthor raised a hand for silence. He needed to hear this, needed to understand. Chen nodded gratefully. "We studied every species you conquered, Commander, learned from their failures. The Altarians trusted in their shields. We developed weapons that bypass energy barriers entirely. The Nexus Collective relied on their hive mind. We created viral memes that could shatter collective consciousness. Every strength you used against others, we found a counter for." "But the technology," Trelcon protested. "The energy requirements alone for what you're claiming." "Ah, yes, the energy problem." Webb's voice came from the screen. "You assume we're limited to the power sources you can detect. But what if I told you humanity discovered something in the quantum foam? Something that makes fusion power look like burning wood. We call it zero-point extraction, though the name doesn't really do it justice. The sensor readings from the human vessels suddenly spiked, showing energy outputs that should have required a star to generate. Yet the ships themselves remained small, impossibly small for the power they wielded. 25 minutes remaining," Webb noted. "I should also mention, Commander, that Lieutenant Chen isn't the only infiltrator in your fleet. In fact, at this moment, approximately 12% of your total personnel across all vessels are human operatives. They've been waiting for this day, ready to act if necessary." The paranoia that swept through the bridge was palpable. Crew members looked at each other with suspicion, hands moving to weapons. The perfect cohesion of the Krellian military machine was crumbling under the weight of doubt. "Why?" Zaxthor found his voice at last. "If you have this capability, why reveal it? Why not simply destroy us?" Chen answered before Webb could. "Because we're not conquerors, Commander. We're survivors. Every species has the right to exist, to grow, to find their place in the universe. But that right ends when they threaten others' survival. The Empire crossed that line 3,000 worlds ago." "We're offering you a choice," Webb added. "Leave Earth alone, cease your expansion, and we'll fade back into the shadows. Continue your path of conquest, and humanity will end the Krellian Empire. Not through war, but through something far more thorough." "Threats!" Gartok spat. "Nothing but threats and deception. You cannot stand against the full might of the Empire. When the Imperial fleet arrives—" "The Imperial fleet," Chen interrupted quietly, "received new orders 18 hours ago. Orders that diverted them to suppress a rebellion in the outer reaches. Orders that came through proper channels with all correct authentication codes. Orders that will keep them busy for months dealing with a crisis that doesn't actually exist." The tactical display updated, showing the truth of her words. The massive Imperial response fleet that should have been in transit to Earth was indeed heading in the opposite direction, chasing ghosts planted by human intelligence. "You see," Webb explained, "we didn't just study your technology and tactics. We studied your bureaucracy, your command structure, your psychology. 1,000 years of rigid hierarchy makes for predictable responses. Insert the right orders at the right level, and the entire system does exactly what you want." 15 minutes, someone whispered. Zaxthor felt the weight of command crushing down on him. Everything he had believed about the superiority of the Krellian Empire was crumbling. These humans hadn't just prepared for invasion, they had prepared to completely dismantle any threat to their existence. "You mentioned assets around every Krellian world," he said slowly. "More infiltrators?" "Some," Webb admitted, "but mostly something else. You see, Commander, humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology or our tactics. It's our ability to inspire, to share ideas, to make others see possibilities they never imagined." New data flooded the displays. Rebellion reports from across the Empire. Slave species rising up with impossible coordination. Conquered worlds suddenly demonstrating technologies they shouldn't possess. And at the heart of each uprising, the same symbol, a blue marble on a black field. Earth. "For 50 years," Webb continued, Human agents have been spreading throughout your empire, not as conquerors but as teachers, showing oppressed species that resistance is possible, sharing technologies disguised as indigenous innovations, planting seeds of hope in beings who had forgotten what freedom meant. The Varnath uprising last year, Morgeth breathed, the Celestial Liberation Front, the Free Worlds movement, they were all inspired and equipped by humanity, yes, Webb confirmed, though they fought their own battles. We just gave them the tools and knowledge they needed. Amazing what desperate beings can accomplish when someone shows them it's possible. The true scope of humanity's plan was becoming clear. They hadn't prepared to fight the Krellian Empire directly. They had prepared to turn the Empire against itself, to use its own size and oppression as weapons. Every conquered world was a potential ally, every enslaved species a possible rebel, and humanity had been cultivating these alliances for decades. 10 minutes, the countdown continued its relentless march. But why Earth? Zaxthor asked, genuinely puzzled. Why make yourselves a target? You could have remained hidden, pulling strings from the shadows indefinitely. Because every rebellion needs a symbol, Chen answered. Every hope needs a home. We made ourselves visible so others would know they weren't alone. When word spreads that Earth stood against the Empire and survived, how many other worlds will find their courage? The human ships surrounding the fleet began to pulse with energy, their impossible geometries becoming more pronounced. Space itself seemed to ripple around them, reality bending in ways that made even experienced spacers queasy. I'll share one last secret, Webb said, leaning toward the camera. The technology we've shown you, the infiltration capabilities, the zero-point energy, that's not the warning. That's just proof we can back up our threats. The real warning is something else entirely. What could be worse than what you've already revealed? Zaxthor asked, though he dreaded the answer. Humanity's relationship with death, Webb said simply. Every species we've studied fears extinction. It's rational, logical. But humans? We've lived so close to extinction for so long that we've made friends with the concept. We've written poetry about our own demise, created art from our mortality, found beauty in endings. The human's expression grew deadly serious. Your empire conquers through fear of death. But what happens when you face a species that's already accepted its own mortality? That's spent its entire existence preparing for the worst-case scenario? We've seeded the galaxy with our knowledge, Commander. Even if you somehow destroyed Earth, 100 worlds now carry humanity's legacy. Our ideas, our technologies, our refusal to kneel. 5 minutes. Lieutenant Chen stepped forward. Commander, Earth's message is simple. The age of empires built on conquest is over. The galaxy is changing, evolving towards something new. The Krellian Empire can be part of that change, or it can be swept away by it. But either way, the old ways die today. The bridge was silent except for the hum of instruments and the whisper of recycled air. Every officer looked to Zaxthor, waiting for orders that would determine not just their fate, but possibly the fate of the entire empire. If we leave, Zaxthor said slowly, if we report back that Earth is too dangerous to conquer, what's to stop you from attacking the Empire anyway? Nothing, Webb admitted freely. Except that we have better things to do. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy, Commander. We want to explore it, to learn from it, to help it grow into something better than empires and conquered subjects. Your civilization has knowledge and culture worth preserving. But only if it can evolve beyond the need to dominate others. 3 minutes. The impossible human ships pulsed brighter, reality warping further around them. Whatever weapons they carried, whatever technologies they had developed in secret, they were preparing to use them. And based on everything Zaxthor had seen, he had no doubt they would be devastatingly effective. You've put considerable thought into this, he observed. We've had time, Webb replied. And motivation. Every transmission of a dying world reached Earth eventually. Every cry for help that went unanswered. Every civilization that fell to your empire's march. We heard them all, Commander, and we swore it would end with us. 1 minute, decision time. Zaxthor looked around his bridge, saw the fear and uncertainty in his crew's faces. They had entered this system as conquerors, secure in their superiority. Now they faced a choice that would echo through history. Attack and likely face technologies they couldn't understand wielded by a species that had outmaneuvered them at every turn. Or retreat and report that Earth, impossible, incredible Earth, was beyond their ability to conquer. The countdown reached 30 seconds. Around them, the human ships began to move, taking positions that suggested they were preparing for something unprecedented. The gravitational anomalies intensified, making it clear that whatever humanity had discovered in the quantum foam, they were ready to weaponize it. All ships, Zaxthor commanded, his voice carrying the weight of an empire's future. Prepare for withdrawal. Set course for the transit point. Sir? Vexara questioned, though relief was evident in her voice. Earth has made its position clear, Zaxthor continued, and they've demonstrated the capability to enforce it. We'll return to Imperial Center and report that this world is unsuitable for conquest. On the screen, Dr. Webb nodded approvingly. A wise choice, Commander. Lieutenant Chen will remain with you for the journey to ensure there are no misunderstandings about what transpired here. Think of her as a cultural liaison. Chen's form solidified fully into her human appearance. I'll also be happy to share some basic technical data about our defensive capabilities, just enough to ensure the Empire understands that Earth is better as a friend than an enemy. As the Krellian fleet began its withdrawal, the human ships started to fade from sensors, their impossible forms dissolving back into whatever dimension they had emerged from. But Zaxthor knew they were still there, watching, waiting, ready to respond if the Empire changed its mind. Dr. Webb, Zaxthor said as the countdown reached 0. One last question. Was any of it real? The infiltrators, the technology, the uprisings across the Empire? Webb's smile was enigmatic. Does it matter, Commander? The threat was real enough to make you think twice. And sometimes, thinking twice is all that stands between civilization and catastrophe. Safe travels, Commander Zaxthor. May we meet again under more peaceful circumstances. The transmission ended, leaving the Krellian fleet to begin its long journey home with a story that would shake the Empire to its foundations. Earth remained untouched, spinning peacefully in the void, but no one aboard the retreating ships would ever see it as just another primitive world again. As they reached the edge of the system, Vexara reported one final anomaly. Commander, I'm detecting a message being broadcast from Earth on all frequencies. It's directed at the entire galaxy. Put it through, Zaxthor ordered, curious despite himself. The message was simple, transmitted in thousands of languages. To all who can hear this, Earth stands ready, not as conquerors but as neighbors, not as rulers but as partners. The age of empires is ending. The age of cooperation is beginning. Any who come in peace will find peace. Any who come in war will find they are not prepared for humanity's answer. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Welcome to the galactic community. As the Krellian fleet entered hyperspace, Zaxthor couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed a pivotal moment in galactic history. Earth had not just defended itself, it had announced a new paradigm, and somewhere deep in his tactical mind, he suspected that humanity's true victory had not been in the weapons they revealed, but in the ideas they had planted. The Empire would survive this encounter, but it would never be the same. And perhaps, Zaxthor thought as he watched the stars blur into lines of light, that was humanity's most terrifying weapon of all. The Imperial Senate chamber had never been so quiet. 3,000 tiers of seats rose in concentric circles around the central speaking platform, each occupied by representatives from the Krellian Empire's core worlds. They had gathered to hear Commander Zaxthor's report, but what they were learning shook the very foundations of their civilization. And so, Zaxthor concluded his testimony, we withdrew from the Sol system without engaging human forces. In my assessment, Earth represents a threat unlike any we have previously encountered, not merely in terms of military capability, but in their fundamental approach to galactic relations. Senator Kraxmar, ancient even by Krellian standards, leaned forward from his elevated seat. Commander, are you seriously suggesting that a single pre-FTL world forced an Imperial fleet to retreat? That they possessed technologies beyond our understanding? I am stating facts, Senator, Zaxthor replied calmly. Whether their capabilities were as extensive as claimed remains uncertain, but the destruction of the Vega Depot was real. The presence of human infiltrators in our ranks was real. The coordinated uprisings across 17 sectors were real. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The uprisings had been impossible to hide. Worlds that had been pacified for centuries suddenly demonstrating advanced tactics and technologies, slave species organizing with uncanny precision, and always that same symbol, Earth's blue marble against the black of space. Show them, Zaxthor commanded. The holographic display came to life, showing Lieutenant Sarah Chen. She had remained with the fleet as promised, sharing carefully selected information about Earth's capabilities. Now she stood before the Empire's leadership, still wearing the shape-shifting suit that allowed her to appear Krellian when needed. Honored Senators, Chen began, her voice carrying despite the chamber's vastness. Earth sends greetings to the Krellian Empire. I am here as proof of our commitment to transparency. We have no desire for conflict, only for understanding. Understanding, Senator Vauxhall scoffed. You infiltrated our military, sabotaged our installations, and sparked rebellions across our territory. These are acts of war. No, Chen corrected gently. They were acts of preparation. Every action we took was defensive in nature. We never initiated aggression. We simply ensured that if the Empire chose to attack Earth, the cost would be catastrophic. Not just for us, but for you. She gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show a complex web of connections spreading across the galaxy. For 50 Earth years, we've been building networks, not of spies and saboteurs, but of teachers and helpers. We've shared knowledge with oppressed species, provided hope to the hopeless, demonstrated that the Empire's power was not absolute. Lies, another senator shouted. The Empire's strength is unquestionable. 3,000 worlds bow to our authority. Did, Chen corrected. 3,000 worlds did bow to your authority, but that number decreases daily. The Varnath have retaken their homeworld. The Celestial Federation has reformed with technologies that make their systems impregnable. The outer reaches have declared independence, and your own fleet reports they lack the resources to retake them. The display showed system after system changing colors, from imperial purple to the varied hues of independence. It was happening too fast for the Empire to respond. A cascade of liberation that had been carefully orchestrated over decades. But we offer an alternative, Chen continued. Earth proposes a new paradigm. Transform the Empire from a structure of conquest to one of voluntary alliance. Share technology and knowledge freely. Respect the sovereignty of all species. Become leaders through merit and wisdom rather than force. Preposterous, Kraxmar declared. The Empire has stood for 1,000 years on the principle of strength. The strong lead, the weak follow. It is the natural order. Is it? Chen asked. Earth's history suggests otherwise. Our strongest alliances came from mutual respect, not domination. Our greatest achievements arose from cooperation, not subjugation. We went from planet-bound to galaxy-spanning influence in less than a century. How long did it take the Empire to achieve the same reach through conquest? The question hung in the air, uncomfortable in its implications. The Empire's expansion had taken millennia, each world requiring years or decades to fully pacify. Earth had achieved similar influence through ideas alone. Grand Admiral Thaxor has requested permission to address the Senate, an aide announced. The Empire's supreme military commander entered, his bearing still proud despite the defeat he was about to report. Senators, I must inform you that the situation has deteriorated further. The Third Fleet encountered what claimed to be a human defense force near the Rigel sector. They were discouraged from proceeding. Discouraged how? Voxel demanded. The human ships demonstrated the ability to manipulate spacetime itself, Thaxor reported, his voice hollow. They created what can only be described as pocket dimensions, trapping our vessels in loops of folded space. No damage was done, but our ships were helpless until released. They could have destroyed the entire fleet at leisure. Moreover, the Admiral continued, we've detected similar human vessels near every major Imperial stronghold. They're not attacking, merely watching, making their presence known. The psychological effect on our forces has been considerable. Chen nodded. We call it the Sword of Damocles strategy. Why fight when the mere knowledge of our capability achieves the same result? Your military forces are paralyzed by uncertainty. They don't know our full capabilities, so they must assume the worst. This is intolerable, Kraxmar snarled. The Empire will not be held hostage by threats and shadows. We'll mobilize every fleet, call upon every warrior. To fight what exactly? Chen interrupted. Ships that exist partially outside normal space? Weapons that manipulate fundamental forces? Infiltrators who could be anyone, anywhere? And even if you could fight us? What of the 100 worlds now armed with human knowledge? The 1,000 species inspired by Earth's example? She stepped forward, her form shifting briefly to show her true human appearance before returning to Krellian shape. Senators, Earth's warning was never about our weapons. It was about the future we represent. A galaxy where power comes from consensus, not conquest. Where diversity is strength, not weakness. Where every species has the right to determine its own destiny. The Empire can be part of this future, she continued. Your technology, your knowledge, your culture, they all have value, but only if you're willing to share them as equals, not impose them as conquerors. Silence fell over the chamber as the senators digested this. Everything they had built their civilization on was being challenged. The natural order they had believed in was revealed as merely one possibility among many. Then something unexpected happened. Senator Irilna, representative of one of the Empire's earliest conquests, stood. I wish to share something with this chamber, she said, her voice trembling. My world has been part of the Empire for 800 years. In all that time, we have served loyally, believing we had no choice. But last month, we received a transmission, not from Earth's government but from Earth's people. Messages of support, technical specifications for defensive shields, and something else, stories. She paused, gathering courage. Stories of humans who fought against impossible odds and won. Stories of cooperation between different groups achieving what none could alone. Stories that reminded us that we once had our own stories, before the Empire made us forget them. My world has formally requested independence. We no longer wish to be subjects. We wish to be ourselves again. The uproar was immediate. A core world, one that had been imperial for centuries, declaring independence? It was unthinkable. Yet as the argument raged, more senators stood. Representatives of conquered worlds who had remained silent for generations suddenly found their voices. Zephyros Prime requests recognition as a sovereign system. The Altarian Confederation withdraws from imperial administration. The twin worlds of Gemini claim their ancient rights of self-governance. One by one, like dominoes falling, worlds that had seemed permanently absorbed into the Empire declared their desire for freedom. Not through violence or rebellion, but through simple declaration. The human example had shown them it was possible, and that possibility had become unstoppable reality. Zaxthor watched from his position, understanding now the true terror of Earth's warning. They hadn't threatened the Empire with destruction. They had threatened it with irrelevance. By demonstrating that there was another way, they had undermined the fundamental premise of imperial rule. "Order! Order!" Kraxmar shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos. The perfect unity of the Senate was fragmenting, representatives arguing not just about Earth, but about the very nature of the Empire itself. Through it all, Chen stood calmly at the center, a still point in the storm. When the noise finally died down, she spoke again. "Earth's message remains the same. We don't seek the Empire's destruction, we seek its transformation. Become a voluntary alliance of worlds, united by mutual benefit rather than force. Share knowledge freely, respect sovereignty universally, lead by example rather than dominion." "And if we refuse?" Kraxmar asked, though his voice had lost much of its earlier certainty. "Then you'll face a galaxy that has moved beyond you," Chen replied simply. "Every day more worlds embrace the new paradigm. Every day, the Empire's influence shrinks. You can adapt and remain relevant, or resist and become a historical footnote. The choice is yours." A communication beacon activated, drawing all attention. The holographic display showed a human figure, but not Dr. Webb. This was someone new, younger, wearing simple clothes rather than any official uniform. "Hello," the figure said. "I'm Marcus Thompson, a teacher from Earth. I'm currently on Varnath, helping establish their new educational system. I wanted the Senate to know that we're not conquerors or overlords. We're just people who believe every species deserves the chance to reach their full potential. The Varnath are already exceeding our wildest expectations. Imagine what the galaxy could achieve if all species were free to contribute their unique perspectives and abilities." The transmission shifted, showing Varnath citizens working alongside humans, building something that looked like a massive communication array. "This is the Galactic Voice Project," Thompson explained. "A network that will allow instantaneous communication between any worlds that choose to join. No censorship, no control, just free exchange of ideas. 15 worlds have already connected. By next year, we expect hundreds." The implications were staggering. The Empire maintained control partly through managing information flow. A free communication network would make such control impossible. "You see," Chen addressed the Senate again, "humanity's greatest weapon was never technology. It was the simple belief that things could be better. That belief is now spreading across the galaxy at the speed of thought. You cannot fight an idea whose time has come." Thaxor, the Grand Admiral who had commanded the Empire's forces for 2 centuries, slowly removed his rank insignia and placed them on the podium. "I have served the Empire faithfully my entire life," he said quietly. "I believed in our mission, our right to rule. But I've also seen the cost. The world stripped of resources, the cultures erased, the potential wasted. Perhaps it's time for something new." The symbolic gesture sent shock waves through the chamber. If the Grand Admiral himself was questioning the Empire's path, what hope was there for the old ways? Kraxmar, ancient and stubborn, made one last attempt. "And what of the Krellian people? What becomes of us in this new galaxy you envision? We who have ruled for 1,000 years?" Chen's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "You become what you always could have been. Leaders through merit rather than force. Teachers through wisdom rather than decree. Partners rather than masters. The galaxy doesn't need rulers, Senator. It needs guides. And the Krellian people, with their millennium of experience, could be the greatest guides of all. But only if you choose to be, she added. Earth won't force this transformation upon you. We've simply made it possible. The decision to change, to evolve, to become something greater than an empire, that must come from you. The Senate chamber fell into contemplative silence. Through the great windows, the stars of the galaxy sparkled, each potentially harboring worlds that were even now making their own choices about the future. The empire that had seemed eternal just days ago now faced the possibility of its own transformation or dissolution. Zaxthor stepped forward one final time. Senators, I have faced humanity's power firsthand, but more than their weapons, I was impressed by their vision. They saw a galaxy united not by force, but by choice. They prepared not just for war, but for peace. They invested not in conquest, but in connection. If that is the future, perhaps we should consider our place in it. As debates raged and arguments flew, Chen quietly activated a communication device. Dr. Webb, this is Chen. The seed is planted. The Senate is divided, but the ideas are taking root. Webb's voice came back, warm with approval. Excellent work, Lieutenant. Remember, we're not trying to destroy the Empire. We're trying to save it from itself. Every civilization deserves the chance to evolve. Understood. How are the other initiatives progressing? Beyond our best projections. The Rigel Conference has 37 species attending. The Technology Share program has distributed plans for clean energy to over 200 worlds. And the Cultural Heritage Project has recovered and preserved art forms from 60 civilizations the Empire tried to erase. Humanity's warning is becoming humanity's promise. As Chen signed off, she watched the Krellian Senate grapple with their new reality. Some would resist, clinging to the old ways. Others would embrace change, seeing opportunity where their peers saw only threat. But all would have to acknowledge the fundamental truth Earth had demonstrated. The age of empires was ending, and something new was being born. Outside the Senate chamber, across the Empire's core worlds, citizens were receiving transmissions from Earth. Not demands or threats, but offers. Educational programs, medical knowledge, agricultural techniques, art and music and literature from 100 different Earth cultures. Each transmission ended with the same message. From Earth, with hope for a peaceful future, you are not alone. The Empire had targeted Earth expecting to find another primitive world to conquer. Instead, they had found a species that had turned survival into an art form and preparation into a science. But most terrifyingly of all, they had found a species that believed in something more powerful than any weapon. The idea that every being deserved freedom, dignity, and the chance to reach for the stars on their own terms. As the Krellian Senate continued its historic debate, Earth's ships maintained their silent watch. Not as conquerors waiting to strike, but as midwives ready to assist in the birth of a new galactic order. The warning had been delivered. The choice had been offered. Now came the hardest part of all, waiting to see what the galaxy would choose. In the end, that was humanity's most terrifying warning of all. Not that they could destroy the Empire, but that they could make it irrelevant. Not that they would impose their will, but that they would inspire others to find their own. Not that they would rule the galaxy, but that they would teach it to rule itself. The Empire had targeted Earth. But Earth had targeted something far more vulnerable than ships or worlds or armies. Earth had targeted the very idea of empire itself. And ideas, as the Krellians were learning, were the most dangerous weapons of all. As news of the Senate's debates spread across the galaxy, worlds that had been silent for centuries began to speak. Species that had been enemies found common ground. Civilizations that had been isolated reached out to neighbors. The transformation Earth had warned of was beginning, not through force, but through choice. And at the heart of it all, a small blue planet continued its orbit around an unremarkable star, its people working not as conquerors, but as catalysts for the greatest revolution the galaxy had ever seen. The revolution of ideas over force, of cooperation over domination, of hope over fear. The Empire had received its warning. The galaxy had heard Earth's message. What happened next would determine the fate of countless worlds and species. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Humanity had given the galaxy a terrifying warning indeed. They had shown it what it could become.